This has been the biggest drama since Showdown missiles. I was suffering, crying, ending up in resignation and despair. Eventually me and many others quit playing almost entirely. Let's talk about what went wrong with skill-based matchmaking and what didn't. Hey guys, this is Nino. Just a quick disclaimer, if you're watching for the entirety of the video, you will also have a chance to participate in a little giveaway for some battle passes. So stay tuned. So to start with, I've got to quickly explain what skill-based matchmaking is and how it actually works. So we've got a team average based on statistics of the players, which are the battles, the win rate, the damage, the kills, and also the spots. So let me just emphasize this. This is based on team average, not single player average. This will be important later on in the video. Also very important here, we don't have skill brackets, we do have very mixed teams though. Let's move on to why it was created in the first place. The thing that Wargaming was trying to tackle here with the skill-based matchmaking was the fact that the games were often unbalanced and therefore feeling unfair for a majority of the people who are actually beneath 50% in reality. So what was pointed out there as the main issue were these so-called turbo battles or steamrolls, which are just very unbalanced and meaning that one team quickly wins the game without the other team having any significant chance. Let me quote Wargaming here very quick. The team's chances will be more balanced, resulting in fairer and more interesting battles. Quote, testing has shown that the duration of battles increases and the proportion of so-called turbo battles, i.e. extremely fast battles, decreases. As before, the difficulty of regular battles will be lower than in the rating battles mode. In fun modes, the matchmaker will remain completely random. Also, for the less than 5,000 battle players, they also are not affected by this matchmaking here. So let me just explain what was seen as the main problem of the game here. There are on the one hand the players who are just basically a victim of chance, who are maybe having the good players on their teams, maybe having the good players on the enemy teams. And they are not really having much of a chance against them, so they will be thrown around quite a lot and do not really get the most out of the battles that they potentially could. For the top win rate players on the other hand, it might be just a little bit boring to fight against the bad players, and therefore just making the teams more balanced could in theory lead to some very tense battles. As a result of that, the battles will be lasting longer and will be ending up in very close situations more often. So in theory the games would be more exciting to every single player, although the stats would not really matter that much anymore. The intensity was increasing, and personally I could relate to some degree. I've got to say I was really open to trying to test out what this new matchmaking was going to bring to my playstyle, and was just trying to not pay attention to the statistics and hoping to see some interesting games here. And what I felt like, especially in platoons, it could be very interesting to have some top players platooning against you. If you're on a higher level, then you would have often constantly the same enemies against you, and it would be sometimes a little bit annoying, but at the same time you could get into some very competitive gameplay here. Also, for the majority of the players it is practically true that the games were a lot more balanced. But why it does not work? The higher your win rate, the better your opponents, not your teammates. As a matter of fact, this happened here to the skill-based matchmaking, that actually your teams did not get better at all due to there not being any skill brackets or so. So we've ended up with the enemies constantly getting better and better and better, while your teammates basically stayed around average. The outliers influence the matchmaking quite a lot here. Let me explain you why with a simple calculation. So if we are taking one 70% player playing in a team of 50% players only, so 1 times 70% and 6 times 50%. That makes up for a team average of 52.9% win rate. We're just going to ignore the other statistics for now because they are a little bit less relevant. But on the other team then, we don't have another 70% player because they are rather rare in this game. So what the matchmaker does here is not going for the player-based matchmaking, but rather the team-based matchmaking. So they are having 56% players and the rest being just standard 50% players. The team's average here is 52.6%. Compare that to the 52.9%, that is actually lower. But at the same time you've got 3 people of significantly higher average than the standard people versus just one 70% on the other team. So why is this even an issue? We've got to understand here what this win rate even reflects. So for the first part, for all these people beneath 50%, they are basically learning the mechanics of the game. They are learning how to drive, how to aim, how to shoot, and how to angle their tank. That is very, very basic stuff that just leads them to the 50% bulk where most of the people are actually playing. But as soon as you're getting above the 50% win rate, we've got so much stuff to learn here. We've got the repositioning, we've got the pushes, we've got the re-pushes, the counter pushes basically, the baiting, the teamwork, the focus fire. A lot of knowledge is required here, and that is just basically open, and we can get to 80-90% win rate in Platoon here, and there's a lot to learn. It is basically what to do and when to do it in whatever the situation is. But the point here is that the mechanical skill level of aiming and shooting does not significantly improve anymore. It is only about the movement. So if we are taking 3 times a 56% win rate player who is significantly better in positioning than a 50% player, that is a much bigger advantage than only one 70% player on a team. So if we're taking 3 56% win rate players, they are going to be able to take good positions early on, while one 70% player cannot take many good positions. So as a result, then we've got the 56% players, or everyone above 50%, taking aggressive positions at the start. There are certain key positions on every single map. Basically 2 to 3 positions for the entirety of the map are enough to secure a decent amount of map control and allow you to just win the game a lot more easily. One 70% player can only take one of those positions and will be able to overlook only one little part, one little fraction of the map, and has to focus on relocating sooner or later. But the problem here is that if you are just the only good player on a team, then you cannot relocate to the other side because the enemies are already having an advantage over there. Just think of it this way. 3 people of 7 people on the field on one team do mean that you are having around half the people on a team being better than the opponents. So on my games under skill-based matchmaking, I often noticed that the enemies were just all over the map. They were everywhere. They were always having the advantage in terms of positioning, while my teammates were either YOLOing in at the start or just camping in the rear, not knowing what to do. Like a typical 50%er does drive around pretty randomly. And I genuinely do like the map design of having some key positions that you can learn about, but it is not helpful if you are having a team that is not knowing what to do versus a team that knows what to do. So I was just ending up in one disadvantage after the other. I could not even relocate much, despite this being my main strength as a 70% plus player who was around 80% before this update even. So I could not just fight for one side and then go for the other side, because if I try to move around to the other side, I notice, oh, well, my teammates are already dead over there as well, so I cannot push forwards into some 56% player who is covering his teammate as well, because I'm not better in terms of aiming. I cannot push a good player without my teammates helping me out, and those were certainly not doing anything in that regard. So my only decision to go somewhere else is also not really helping either, because I will also just end up in a disadvantage, and the best I can do is basically farm. On top of that, if you're having 3 tanks or 3 people who are capable of some teamwork, just some very basic teamwork on one team, they will push you. They will do some moves together as well. And often I notice that if I'm flanking around the map, if I'm just trying to get behind the enemies, for example, then almost the entirety of the enemy team is counter-pushing me, trying to chase me out of my position, when my teammates were then theoretically having an advantage on the other side, but they were not moving at all. But okay, as you're hearing me complain here, you are maybe asking yourself, well, actually this doesn't apply to myself, I'm not a pro player, so why should I actually care? And I would have to agree with you. For the majority of the players, the skill-based matchmaking was actually fine. It was kind of good, more tense battles, just leading to some better options here. Not a lot of enemies that are just significantly outplaying your teammates there. But I do see a big problem in the fact that rewarding progress is not really given here anymore. You were not being rewarded for being a better player or becoming a better player, just being punished for that. And I think that is a huge problem in order to secure the future of the game. Also, to those who have already been on a top level, they were losing their progress basically. And those are some of the most invested into the game by time and also money that they put into this. I don't want to elevate myself or any other pro player or the average player in the game, but this is kind of the ideal player that others aspire to and others try to get up to. So to just put it in numbers, my actual win rate dropped from 77% in the last update to just barely 60% in this update. Some of my subscribers who are actually just having far less experience were performing better than myself suddenly. So eventually I really had to ask myself, am I even still worth watching here for you guys? Am I even still delivering anything in terms of gameplay that you can learn from? What is the reason for anyone to learn from someone who is barely better than you, even if this guy is just having a ton more experience, but the performance, statistically speaking, is just not having any significant increase there? What's the point of increasing in level at that point and learning the game? Also, while it's true that I was just having a lot more tense battles, a lot of 3v3 situations, although mostly my teammates were at a disadvantage, yes, these games became more tense. And yes, I felt like being pressured more and that I was just more responsible for my teammates because I was simply the only good player on my team. But at the same time, these games are almost always impossible to turn around still. So as a result, I was having a lot less masteries, a lot less close games. And if I'm honestly speaking, these top games, these 1v3 situations, 7k, 8k damage maybe, those were the kind of stuff I lived for. Always in the hunt for the perfect game. This brings me to the next point, battle variety. While the previous playstyle has been very diverse, this update, the skill-based matchmaking brought along that the games were very even, they were very monotonous in the way that they were often just very stale there. In the past, we've had games where you've had a way better team and you've just had to try your best to adjust to that, and you really had to give your best in order to still get some last bites of damage. But at the same time, there were also the battles where you had a huge disadvantage and where you then had to focus a lot more on surviving and falling back and trying stuff. And you could still be sure that there were some bad opponents on the enemy team as well that allowed you to turn around the impossible game. So what I'm trying to say is that there were very unpredictable scenarios in the games that you've never seen before. Even after my 150,000 battles in this game, I've still had a lot of situations that I've never ever had before, and some incredible wins that I was really glad about getting so. These were a lot less common in the skill-based matchmaking. Also, looking back at my earlier times in World of Tanks Blitz, I've got to say that I honestly learned a lot from just other good players on my teams. So if you are just on a low win rate in skill-based matchmaking, you won't have any good players to learn from. You will only know what works basically against bad opponents. But if you were to meet a significantly better player, you would be absolutely lost, and it would just be an entirely different game then. Having talked about the battle variety, now I also have to mention the game mode variety. In the past we've had the fun modes, we've had the random games, which are rather relaxed but can also be very try-hardy depending on your goal. There are very different kinds of goals to random games, as you might know. And then there are the rating battles, which also have a different playstyle and do require more focus, as they are just harder. And then there are the competitive tournaments as well, where you really try your best. But with the skill-based matchmaking being introduced, we only had the fun modes. Let's just shove them away a little bit. I don't play those. And then we've had the randoms, skill-based matchmaking randoms, and the ratings, which were basically exactly the same thing. I could not really differentiate much between the SBMM and the rating games for me, unless if I just started with the rating games, because then the games were more random than in the skill-based matchmaking random games. So I was really asking myself, why was I actually now having to have 2 times the same thing with a different name? Why can there not be some relaxed game mode like randoms before, and then some ratings that offer me to try hard a lot more? And as this got me to think about the future of the game, I was also having to say, well, actually I would wish for ratings to be actually skill-based, more competitive, and not just leading to better opponents. I think this is a huge problem here for the rating games, just as a skill-based matchmaking, that a better level leads to enemies becoming better just because of this team average thingy and not having better teammates. But some big reason for people being so toxic about the game, which is a sad reality, is often that the teams are just consisting of very different kinds of levels in terms of the skill base here. So as a matter of fact, you are having some people who are 70% and others who are just basically 50% or even lower than that. And the teamwork is not really given among those different levels there. And rating games also just reward some very different kind of stuff, like just farming damage, and staying alive is being rewarded more than teamwork and actually winning the battle, because you constantly need to focus on trying to reach the top of your team to even get some points despite a defeat. Also, ratings just reward effort a lot more than skill. So someone who has like 55% win rate can reach the same amount of rating points as me with 70% plus by just playing a lot more. So from my experience, most other top players were not even that interested in rating games, because it felt like just like worse random games with an increased difficulty level, but not like just having the benefits of what this game is actually capable of. The kind of platooning, the teamwork, the kind of stuff that you get in tournaments as well. Basically just really the next level of gameplay. So in order to fix that, we could, for example, have something like skill brackets or leagues, as some subscribers also just kindly mentioned, which do exist in other games, so that we're only having people of very similar win rate playing together, or just very similar ratings. It would still have to be worked out what exactly we were going for there. Also, I honestly don't think that skill-based matchmaking was an entirely horrible decision if you're thinking about just increasing the difficulty of the games. I was also having some fun occasionally, but I felt like it was rather poorly executed. I would rather wish for some other options, like for example just diminishing or just decreasing the amount of top players or really bad players on a team, so you were not having the kind of very imbalanced team like 370%ers against 340%ers in the extreme case. Another thing that was really struggling to understand was the choice of the average of the teams, especially on the all-time statistics, which do not really reflect the skill all too well in my opinion. So we could, for example, go for some 30-die stats as a basis there. Or we could be picking the median of a team, which basically means lining up the entirety of the team from worst to best and then choosing the middle one, which is often a lot more representative for the level of a team or just certain group than the averages. But as you probably know, skill-based matchmaking is gone for now. But if it's going to come back, that's an entirely different question. I don't think that Wargaming is going to throw away all the efforts that they put into this, and I'm not entirely sure whether they should. I would actually be happy if they were increasing or just improving the rating battle experience to make this one more competitive and leave the random games in place, so we could still farm our damage, we could farm our win rate in platoons, or do whatever we want to. And just to mention it again, I was really giving skill-based matchmaking an honest try, not caring about my stats too much, but I was just being disappointed over and over again until I could not take it anymore and just decided to play rating games, which were just kind of the smaller evil, but I can really not say that I enjoyed them in any significant way. At times I was honestly really desperate about the game and my future in this game, and I've played 150,000 games here. And I've never been at the point of saying, okay, that's it, I will quit. I was missing the times of farming damage and just playing whenever I felt like it. Not having to try hard all the times, not having to choose good tanks because bad tanks would lead to automatic defeats, since I was the one having to carry my teammates. On a final note, I'm really happy that Wargaming was listening to the feedback that they received and just checking the statistics. They were not doing the same mistake as what they showed in Missile, and just leaving a bad decision in place for way too long. It only took them one update to just get back to the old matchmaking now, so hats off to that. I think there will be very different opinions about the skill-based matchmaking. Some will have loved it, some will have hated it. I want to know, what is your opinion? Just let me know in the comments down below your opinion about the skill-based matchmaking, and also include your in-game name and the ID. Just copy by pressing your name in the profile, and you will be able to win a battle pass, one of 3 to be exact, within the next days. Thanks for watching.